Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the AZAPO Limpopo online political education series. Today, we are tackling the topic of politics and economics of the coronavirus. My guest this afternoon is Professor Monde Ntwasa. He does not need any introduction when it comes to these matters. He is a specialist and a professor at the University of South Africa. He is going to be talking to us about the coronavirus, looking at its politics and the related economics. He is here with us this afternoon. So by those few words, I would like to welcome Professor Monde Ntwasa and AZAPO Stalwart and the BCM Kader. Comrade Monde.
Thank you, comrade. Let us start by doing the right thing, which is to share this file. I hope it's not going to give us problems.
Oh, yeah.
Start sharing. I think it's this one.
Okay, whilst he is setting up, just to alert you that we are live on Facebook on the AZAPO Limpopo Facebook platform, as well as the AZAPO Eastern Cape Facebook platform, and you will also find us on the National AZAPO platform. So all of those three platforms are available for you to engage with us.
Can you see it?
I can see your presentation there.
Okay.
All right, you can take the floor.
Let me just end the show for a while, for a bit, and then we start.
Okay.
Is everybody ready now?
Yeah, we can go for it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation. It's really not an invitation, just an invitation to me. It's an excellent opportunity for me to share ideas with people who are likely to consider them and not dismiss them outright because of like-mindedness. What I'm going to do today is basically to share information with like-minded people and also to share opinions which may be correct or not correct. So I'm not presenting solutions to anything or presenting any truths, but I am presenting opinions which I hope will spark a debate and important and a constructive discussion. So I'm really very thankful for the invitation. The title that was given to me that I see for the workshop, the title I see for the workshop is The Politics of Coronavirus, of the pandemic rather, I think. But I think what I'm going to do, that's why I'm giving it this title also, the virus itself and its social and political impact. I think that we will be able to discuss the ramifications, social and political ramifications of the virus if we understand what the virus is all about in the first place. So I'm going to start talking about the nature of the disease itself, and I shall talk about the medical interventions that have been offered globally, and then talk about the politics of the pandemic, both global and national politics. But I shall, in the and focus on the response by South Africa to the pandemic. As I said, I'm not offering truths, I'm offering only a basis for discussion. So I'll start by talking about the immune system, because I think it's important for us. It's not just politics of it, but it's also for our own personal benefits to understand the virus and the disease itself. So I shall talk about the pathogenesis of the virus, in other words, how the virus causes disease. And then I will talk about vaccination, because vaccination is the most important thing now that is on the table that's offered by the world to deal with the coronavirus. So the immune system obviously is something that is everywhere on our bodies, but there are specific organs and specific tissues which specialize in the immune system. But as you can imagine, it must be all over. The immune system is designed to protect us from the environmental stresses, not only infections, but also stresses that cause injuries of all sorts to the body. Even cancer is protected, is controlled by the immune system, although it is not necessarily through infection. The skin is a very important part of this protective mechanism. Of course, the skin is the physical barrier between us and the environment, and that's very important. It's not only acting as a physical barrier, it is also armed with important apparatus, immune apparatus to protect us from infections. So as you can see here, all these what call organs and tissues that are indicated here are everywhere. The bone marrow is very important because this is where, this is basically the main factory of of all cells that are circulating in the blood. They all are in the bone marrow, and they're in the bone marrow in the earliest stages of development. So, for instance, all the immune cells, the white blood cells, different types of white blood cells circulating in our blood are in the bone marrow. Their ancestor is in the bone marrow. Their main progenitor is in the bone marrow. And it's just one cell, but that's where we can divide into different types of cells. So it's called stem cell. So the bone marrow is the seat of stem cells. And those stem cells will eventually end up in the blood as different types of, so the bone marrow is very important. That's why sometimes it is transplanted from patient to patient. The other important part of the immune system is the thymus. Thymus is right behind the sternum. Sternum, of course, is the middle of your chest. I don't know whether I can see the arrow here, but it's this white little thing here is Thymus gland. Thymus is important because this is where the maturation of T cells, the subtype of white cells, which is very important for killing organisms such as viruses and bacteria. Those T cells are also important for influencing the development of antibodies. The thymus is very important because it is largest in young people. And by the time you reach the age of 65, the thymus is almost gone, finished, can't see it. It shrunk. So people at that age, at the age of about 65 or so, have got a weaker immune system. And such people, in fact, cannot be helped effectively even by vaccination. So that's why I'm mentioning it's a very important organ, and that is why people at the late stages of their lives do not have a strong immune system because of this little thing here behind the sternum. The other part of the immune system that's very important is the mucous membranes. These mucous membranes, basically the epithelial tissues epithelial tissues are tissues that cover all cavities of the body. Your alimentary system from your mouth all the way is covered by epithelia. Your blood, what called, is in tubes, which are covered by epithelia. The air passages from your nostrils, as you can see here, all of that is epithelia. These tissues are very important because they form another barrier other than the skin that protects us from the environment. And they're particularly important because we inevitably have to introduce things into these epithelia because of our lives. For instance, we take food. The food is an environmental problem for the epithelial tissue, and it introduces things into our system. Epithelial tissue is important to make sure that whatever comes with the food does not end up in your circulation. So the epithelial tissues all over the body are armed with what called immediately acting immune machinery, which we shall talk about later. I'm mentioning this thing because it's important. If you notice this person here from the nostrils, that's where all of that that is a darker print there is epithelial tissue that goes all the way into the throat, and you can see it converges also with the mouth going down. This is the upper respiratory tract, in fact, and this is where the virus enters the body. This is the only known vehicle for viral entry to infect a person. And then it ends up obviously in the lower respiratory tract, which is the lungs. And this is important because that is why the wearing of masks is so important, because if you can prevent the virus from entering here, there is no way you're going to get infected. You won't be infected by it being in your mouth or in your anywhere in your body. If you can prevent it from entering your mouth and your nostrils, then you can't get sick of the virus, even if you are in an environment where it is. And it's also important to note this because it seems that the virus spends some time in the upper respiratory tract before it goes to the lower respiratory tract. Remember, it has about 14 days to cause a disease. So if you can prevent it at this stage, that is why the practice that indigenously people started doing ufuta or steaming was so important, because if you steam, first of all, the virus dies at 28 degrees, which is a temperature lower than the temperature that we use in the shower. So if the virus is in your skin, on your face, anywhere, when you shower, it should die, most of it. If you steam your face and inhale hot steam, it's going to die. Hot steam is boiling water, and it's going to reduce any viral load that might be in the upper respiratory tract. By so doing, you reduce the amount of virus that can go to the lower respiratory tract. So steaming is very important for this reason. So that is just the structural arrangements for the immune system. The immune system itself has two arms. There are two arms. One arm is called the innate immune system. The other one is called the adaptive immune system. The innate immune system is the immune system that kicks in immediately when you get an infection. And when you get infections, generally you find you get inflammation. And you can see that if for instance you get an infection on your skin, let's say on your hand, you will see there will be redness. Later, that redness will become whitish, and then it becomes purulent after that. So that is the immune system, basically the innate immune system. It acts immediately. You get an injury either by a pathogen or by physical injury. All the cells of the immune systems will be harnessed by the body and be drawn to that area. And that's what causes the redness, because cells have been attracted from other parts of the body to that area to cause what's called the inflammation there, which is the white blood cells, and also other red blood cells also get what called accumulated. And what happens during immune system is the production of local hormones, which directly attack the virus and also change your body. For instance, when you get an infection by a flu virus, as you know, you immediately get a fever. The fever is caused by the local hormones that are produced by your body, particularly the gamma interferon. It will raise the temperature of your body so that the virus will die. It raises as another mechanism to kill the viruses, because viruses cannot withstand high temperature. So all of that is harnessed by the innate immune system. It acts immediately and it's supposed to kill the virus. Later, you get what you call adaptive immune system. Now, innate immune system is fast, but it's not too specific. It does not distinguish between the types of viruses or the types of bacteria or the types of fungi, but it can distinguish whether it's a virus or a bacteria or a fungi. So it's got a limited specificity. Adaptive immunity is different because what it does is to give you specificity. It not only kills a virus, it kills a specific type of virus. It's very specific. And additionally, it has memory. So it can remember after a while. If you become healthy and a year or so later, or maybe a few months later, the virus attacks you again, the immune system this time will immediately act just almost like the innate immune system. It will faster. When it starts, when you get the infection for the first time, adaptive immunity takes about 2 weeks to develop. And but once it's there, it can stay longer. The innate immunity kicks in immediately, but it dies off later. But the two arms of the immune system work together. The innate immune system also influences the development of the adaptive immune system. I'm mentioning all of this because it's what is the basis of vaccination. So let's talk now about viruses themselves. How do they attack us? Viruses can attack us in different ways. They can attach on the membrane of the cell. So here we've got this big structure with the red line, which is the cell. Red lining is the cell. And the virus is the thing with the black spikes around it. Those spikes are very important for the viruses. They are proteins, and the inner circle below those spikes is the covering of the virus. And this is important to know because this covering of the virus, that round circle, is basically fat. It's just lipids. That is why it is so easy to kill the virus by heating, because you can imagine if you hit the fat, it's going to melt and the virus will die. Inside that fat is the key part of the virus, which is the genome of the virus. That is the part that is really a problem for us. And if the virus is able to introduce that into the cells, then we cannot prevent it easily. So the virus uses these spikes, these black spikes there, to enter into the cells. And viruses can enter cells by attachment. They can attach to the cells using specific receptors. They can fuse with the membrane. The one that you see here is almost like a fusion. It's a fuse. It's fusing with the membrane. There's no particular receptors binding. Or they can inject the genetic material. The virus will be sitting outside. It just injects the genetic material, and that's it. So they've got various types, ways of entering cells. This particular virus, the coronavirus, uses the first type. The one uses receptors. And these are examples of viruses that use receptors. The flu virus, influenza virus, poliovirus uses that. HIV also uses receptors. Everybody knows the receptors of HIV because that is the CD4 receptors that you find on white blood cells. People know because people always talk about CD4 count, and that's because CD4 count basically tells us the amount of white blood cells you have in your body, and those are the receptors that the virus uses to enter the cell. So once it's inside the cell, then the virus releases the genetic material. And the genetic material that's released by the virus is going to then cause the infection. Maybe let's go back to that. If you notice, this red thing there is the genetic material. Once the virus puts the genetic material inside your cell, then it takes over the machinery of the cell to produce more viruses. And then it will produce many, many viruses within that cell, and then repackage those viruses, and then it releases them outside that cells to go to other cells, and it starts infecting, and that's how it will spread around your body. The coronavirus does the same thing. The coronavirus has got this spike protein, which are these protrusions that you see, the red ones outside. These spike proteins it uses to enter your cell. And the receptor for the coronavirus is called an ACE2 receptor. It's an interesting receptor because this receptor has been found to interact with nicotine. And the many publications that are emerging which show that this receptor interacts with nicotine. It's a complex receptor system which has got positive and negative mediators aspects of it in terms of how it interacts with the body. And a lot of work has been done to look at how smoking impacts what you call coronavirus infections. And so far, all results that show from research that's been done show that smoking actually does not have any impact on the pathogenesis of the coronavirus. That in fact it may be what called an impediment, because nicotine apparently binds also to these receptors. If nicotine binds to the receptors, it means that the virus cannot bind to those receptors, which means the virus will find it more difficult to attach, to infect a person who has got a high content of nicotine circulating in their system. The other thing that has been shown is that the nicotine, now I'm talking about nicotine, not smoking, nicotine down-regulates this receptor system, so that our cells of smokers have got less activity of the ACE2 receptor, which could mean also that in those situations the virus could have. But this research at the moment should be taken with some caution, because majority of it comes from systematic reviews of papers, but some experimental evidence is also emerging. So it is interesting that smoking is regarded as one of the problems for infection in South Africa. Now, adaptive immunity, which is the immunity that I say is the most important, but it's the one that takes longer to develop in the body, has got these important response phases. There's the initial response where it is catapulted in the body after a lag period. So after first exposure, it is not there. If you see that there's a lag period, and then it rises up, including the T cells, and then weeks later, there's another round that comes up, which is more protective immunity. And that immunity can stay for a very long time. And then it will have memory so that you will be protected for years to come. And this slide shows here the different stages in terms of days. So you can see that the innate immunity will be acting for the first 5 or so days after infection. You will be relying mostly on the innate immunity for your survival against an infection by a virus or a bacterium or a fungus. You will require, by that time, there is virtually no adaptive immunity that's developing. The first development of adaptive immunity is influenced by the T cells. The T cells are an interface between the innate immunity and adaptive immunity. They are active in innate immunity, but they're also very active in promoting the development of adaptive immunity. But the key thing you want for an adaptive immunity is the development of antibodies. These antibodies, as you can see, they can take up to 2 weeks to reach a phase. And the other important thing about antibodies is that their development does not necessarily mean that you get an immunity, because it depends what type of antibodies that you get. For example, people develop antibodies against HIV, but they do not get protected by the antibodies they develop from HIV, because HIV does not make what you call neutralizing antibodies, enough neutralizing antibodies. What you need is the development of neutralizing antibodies. And that's what all the different vaccination strategies are doing, is to develop a vaccine that can produce not just antibodies, but neutralizing antibodies. And this is what is difficult. This is the major problem with vaccine development, to get those particular antibodies to be developed. And unfortunately, there is not much way of doing it. A lot of it is by chance. Okay, so now let's talk about vaccines. What vaccines are. And it's important because you probably know that there is a lot of resistance around the world against vaccines. People do not like vaccines. So you will see perhaps when we talk now why people do not like vaccines. So there are different types of vaccines. You get what you call inactivated versions of the pathogenic virus. In this case, you take the virus, for instance, you take the coronavirus, and then you inactivate it. In other words, you make it less virulent. You can do this by slowly heating it, or you can do it by growing it through many passages in the laboratory on cells, on cell lines, until it becomes weak, and then you inject it in the patient. So you're hoping that it's going to stay in the patient and stimulate the formation of antibodies without causing disease. You can imagine the dangers of that you do not have sometimes complete confidence that you have inactivated the virus completely. So, but these are unfortunately the vaccines that have been there for a very, very long time. And some of them have been successful, but with some dangers. The poliovirus, for instance, one of those. Live attenuated viruses, these ones are live, they're not weakened, but they have been attenuated. In other words, they've been truncated, their genetic material has been truncated so that to prevent the key virulence factor in it. So it's the same virus, but it's been genetically weakened, but it's still alive. So the problem, of course, with that is that what if the weakening is not complete? So, and then you get subunit vaccines. These are vaccines that also use vectors now, but you take a virus that is known not to cause a disease in humans, and you insert in that virus a gene from the virus that causes the disease, and so that the non-pathogenic virus becomes a vehicle, a vector for the gene that comes from the pathogenic virus. And then you introduce that into the patient, and you are hoping that within the patient, the gene that comes from the pathogenic virus will be converted into protein, and then the body will think that it's got the pathogenic virus and start making antibodies to that virus. Other very new strategies for vaccines have emerged, and this one called the Messenger RNA virus is the first time really that has come to clinical trials. There's no licensed virus like this one, and strangely, that is the vaccine that is currently on top of all the others. In this one, you take the viral RNA and you introduce, not all of it. In this case, they take the viral RNA that encodes that spike protein you saw on the coronavirus, that red thing that I was showing you earlier, on the outside of the virus. So this messenger RNA will be introduced into your body, and inside your body, it will make that protein that is on the surface of the virus. And then the body will think that it's got the virus, and then will make an antibody against that virus. Similar strategy can be used for DNA, or we can make recombinant proteins. So you can take a protein, a gene from the virus, convert it into a protein, and then you can inject that protein into into the patient's body, and then the body will make antibodies against that protein. So there are many strategies by which vaccines are made, and they can be successful before. There are currently more than 200 vaccines that are being developed globally. And this one on this page, the one Moderna therapeutic, at the time I put the slides, the one I've got here, was on phase 1. But it's actually, this is the mRNA virus. It's the first time that an mRNA virus has been used. So it's a major campaign around the world to produce vaccines, because people believe that you can deal with this virus by getting vaccines. Vaccine development is a very, very long process. We won't even talk about exploratory years, because nobody can tell what they are. They can be very short, or can be, in this case, it was very quick. There was no real exploration, because the virus was identified in China very quickly. And this genomic, sequence was published. So there was not a lot of exploration that was done there. But sometimes it can take years before people even know what the problem is. You know, like in the case of HIV, you know, it could take years before people even know what is causing a disease. The preclinical stages can take up to 4 years. This is when the vaccine is being tested on animals. Preclinically, it can take up to 4 years. And then there are the clinical stages where the virus is tested on human beings. And the clinical stages have got key main 3 phases, 1, 2, and 3, but there can be more, because you can get 3A, you can get 2B, 2A and B, 3A, and so on. So this can be more, but these are the key phases, phase 1, 2, and 3. The main difference is what is being tested. The first thing that is tested will be safety of the virus on a small number of people. By the time it gets to the 3rd stage, we are talking about testing on thousands and thousands of people. And this can take up to 8 years. And then, of course, there will be registration and then the launch. Launch is important because it involves what you call the factories and everything, the machinery that is going to produce in large, what you call scaling up and so on. So, but you can get accelerated versions of this process, which is what is happening now. The accelerated, what called the preclinical stage, can be reduced up to 6 months. And in this case, I think the preclinical stages has been at most just 3 months, because most people by April had moved to the phase 1, which is they finished. The virus was discovered in December, around then. So people would have started working on this in January, February. But it's now just 7 months, and people say they're already at phase 3 of the clinical stages. So the acceleration of this virus has been astounding, really, the process that's been taken. And I've been finding it quite strange that the Westerners are blaming the Russians for saying that they have already developed a virus, saying that they have not followed. But everybody has accelerated. In the West also, they have acceleration. Acceleration basically means that you continue to the next phase before you even get the results from the previous phase. So you can start the clinical stages even before you have completed the preclinical stages. That's how acceleration occurs. So, but obviously there's a lot of jealousy between the West and Russia, because there's nothing that Russia has done that is different from what the others are doing. So there are 2 vaccines that are currently in very advanced stages of development. There is one that's produced in Russia by the Gamaleya Research Institute of Epidemiology. And this is the same institute that produced the Ebola virus. So they are very well resourced, apparently, and have got already all the structures. So they would reduce all of that stage of registration and launching, because they already have a facility, is already set up. And the virus that they are using is the same strategy that's used by the Oxford one. It's using what called the vector. It's using an adenovirus vector, which is taken from a chimpanzee, and they've inserted the gene from coronavirus in it. The Russians are using exactly the same strategy as Oxford people. But the Russians already have the layout of the situation, because they've already done a similar vaccine in Ebola. So it's not surprising that they have what called moved faster than others. Moderna is the one that's producing the mRNA virus. This is what called, and the other thing is with the Russians, this is a publicly funded initiative. The Moderna initiative, because I think it's another important part of this vaccine thing. The Moderna one call is mostly privately funded. I mean, if you look at the strategic collaborators here, AstraZeneca, Merck, Vertex, BARDA, Belinda and Melinda Gates, and DARPA. These are the key strategic collaborators of the Moderna one, which is the one that's produced by the West. It's an mRNA virus. And they've got a strategic collaboration also with the USA government. Their headquarters is at Cambridge, Massachusetts. So the virus, production, like I say here, for COVID-19, the vaccine development is comparable to landing on the moon. And that is where the jealousy is coming between the West and Russia, because it's almost like going to the moon. And the Russians are quite aware of that, because they've called their vaccine is called Sputnik, to underline the fact that it's a major, what you call psychological victory over the West for them, I think, in terms of the achievement to get this virus, this vaccine so quickly. And it's ready for production. The Russians are ready for production. The Moderna one, the update indicates that by July 27, which is about 2 weeks or so ago, this is at phase 3 of study. The phase 3 started on the 27th of July. So it's also at the tail end, but it might take a bit longer for them, because they would probably have to do the registration and the launching that the Russians already have done. So those are the vaccines. Now, we talk about the vaccine production itself as being the key thing about the vaccination, but the major problem is going to come at what is called vaccine nationalism. And I think for political parties, it's important to look at to watch this vaccine nationalism and how it impacts society. The one thing that you've already seen about the vaccine is its linkage to national prestige. Already you can see the competition between Russians and the West. But it's also about national security. The Russians, obviously, the first thing they've said they're going to do, their vaccine is geared toward protecting their people. That is their main priority. The West is having a problem. Yeah, like you see this article that comes from Science. Science, of course, is together with Nature, the science publications in the world. And this article appeared in July 28, talking about vaccine nationalism, which threatens global plan to distribute COVID-19. You probably already know that the British have already pre-ordered vaccine dosages, billions of it, from all the companies that are developing vaccines and showing promising results. America, as you have seen in the earlier slide, is already what you call with Moderna. So it's clear that when the vaccine becomes available and if it works, it's going to be available and competition for it is going to be important, and people are going to treat it for their national interest. So vaccine nationalism is the thing that comes with this vaccine production. Okay, so now let's look at the politics of the pandemic. And we start by looking at the global politics and the local politics. And then there's one part that at the end I'd like to talk about, the failure of the liberation movement in this pandemic. One thing that has been baffling everybody, and there is no real answer to it, is why the pandemic is not affecting Africans as it was expected. This article, as you can see, was published again in Science last week, trying to ponder. There's nobody who really knows why is this pandemic not affecting the Africans as everybody has expected. And as you can see in this article, there are many reasons that people are offering. It says although community transmission was reported in major African cities months ago, the predicted number of cities and deaths had not yet been observed. And this is something that we know very well here in Johannesburg, because even before the lockdown, infections were reported at Alexandra here in Johannesburg and in Khayelitsha. And the obvious fear was that within weeks we were going to see bodies falling off the street in Alexandra or Khayelitsha, because how were they going to prevent community transmission? Because whoever got there probably got in touch with some tourists or someone who got in touch with the tourists. But now they were introducing the community. There was going to be community transfer. But we all know that we haven't had this kind of disaster happening in Alexandra or in Khayelitsha. So people have not been able to explain what is going on really in Africa. And other offers were that the population in Africa is too young. Median age is 19.7 years compared to the United States at 38.6. That's the median age. So Africans are younger, they think. Other people say that it's because of genetics and all sorts of things. But the bottom line is that people do not know why the virus is not having the kind of impact it has in Africa as it has in other countries. Now, there are other things about the virus that remain unresolved. The conspiracy theories between the Chinese and the USA. The United States claims that the virus was created by China, and China claims that the virus was created by the United States, and China can produce both motive, as well as the capacity for the United States to produce the virus. We will never know the truth, most probably, but it is obviously something that both nations know, that there is technology to do anything these days. This paper that you see here, which was published in 2002, also in Science, shows that by 2002, we already have the technology, especially engineering technology. I'm talking about physical engineering, electrical engineering, and that kind of engineering, not biological engineering, was already available to produce a virus de novo without using a template. Usually a big, what's called genetic material like that of a virus like this, you would need a naturally occurring template to replicate it and produce another one. But by 2002, we actually have machines which can create a virus de novo completely without using any natural template, and you just synthesize it in the laboratory just like that. So the possibilities for creating biological weapons are quite advanced now, and both countries know that. So, but obviously, we are just a political tool. It's a conspiracy theories between the two of them. We do not know what the truths are because there are people that have got a serious problem. The key observation about the pandemic is that it is happening in the middle of a vicious economic warfare between the two nations, USA and China. And I think that is important because in spite of what everybody thinks or everybody says, that the major threat posed by this virus actually is not human health. But that is what everybody is saying. And everybody is expressing fears about the virus as a major threat against human health. Actually, if you look at it closely, you find that this virus has got a small dent on human health compared to what it's doing to economies. It's destroying economies and it's forcing the world to realign. And therefore, this pandemic, its aftermath is not going to be a health problem, it's going to be major shifts in geopolitics. You look at this report here, this is something in the United States, reporting thousands and thousands of people queuing in cars in Dallas, which is in Texas. I believe Texas is one of the richest, wealthiest states in America. These are people queuing for noodles and basic things. When you look at the queues of those cars, these are top-range cars. These are people driving in top-range cars to queue for basic food like rice in Texas. So the pandemic has exposed a lot of things in the world. It has exposed the fallacy of the notion of democracy in America because it displayed very clearly the structural exclusion of Black Americans from the economy of the United States of America. And that was done so well by this virus, it's undeniable. Even them, they cannot deny. They are pretending to be what you call finding or committed to finding solutions to it. We all know it's not going to happen. But it's causing also Black Americans to really, really be convinced that they're excluded from that, then they need to do something. So they are talking about reparations, specific what you call land restitution. They even think, some of them, of their own state as Black people because they believe they can develop that way. They also now realize that they cannot survive politically by supporting the Democratic Party, which is what they've been doing over the years. They realize that the Democrats and the Republicans are essentially the same. So the solution for Black Americans seemed to be to form their own party. Basically, there are 41 million of them. They should be able to make a significant political force in America. So it is changing because that has been exposed completely. Also, the fragilities that were hidden of the so-called first world nations were exposed. Americans were not even able to support to afford masks, let alone the ventilators. In the beginning, they were fumbling all over the place and even thinking of motor companies to start developing their own ventilators. And China came to help them in the end. So that sort of fragility was hidden before, but now we know that actually the American health system is extremely vulnerable. Also, the looseness of alliances, what people thought were strong alliances, actually have been exposed to be quite loose. You look at the European Union. In the end, they had to apologize for letting Italy deal with their problem alone and cause so much damage. Even though they are in a union, you would expect that the European Union had go ahead an arrangement, a structural arrangement to deal with things like with national disasters as a union. But no, they watched Italy die. And only towards the end, or towards the height of the what you call of the Italian, then they had to apologize. France and Germany and others had to directly apologize to Italy. So that's the so-called alliances that were there, their looseness. So obviously the way they are going to do things in the future is going to be different exactly as a result of this. So there are going to be major shifts in geopolitics caused by this virus. Now, I'm saying that this virus is actually a small dent. There is only 3.6% of people worldwide who have died out of this virus. As you can see here in this slide, this was 2 days ago, on the 13th of August, 20 million people are infected, and just about a quarter, 750,000 actually died so far. So the actual hurt to humankind here is not to their health. It's the economies that have been shattered, really. So, but of course, the people who control everything, who control our minds, who control everything, they give the impression that what they fear is us dying. No, what they fear is the major disruption that is happening to the world. This is only 1% of the population, of the world population, that is being attacked by this virus, really. Because 99% of the people do not have the kind of interests that these people have. They control, the shifts are going to happen, and turmoil is going to be in that 1% of the world population. That's where the most of the damage is happening. Of course, capitalists will never say that we are worried about the loss of our profits. They're going to say we are worried about the loss of jobs. we are worried about poverty. They don't care about poverty. When this thing is over and everybody is grappling to recover from it, the first casualties is going to be labor. The same people who are saying they're worried about jobs. It's always the labor that will be the first casualty. We look at this again. It's published in 2 days on the 7th of August in Science, showing the damage that's been caused by the virus, the infections. If you look at the world, the majority of the people is the Americans and the Europeans, less so in Asia and in Africa. Almost nothing happening in Africa. And people might say in Africa is because testing has not been done. This is not published by Africans, published by them. It shows that, in fact, Africans have been testing in a comparative way amongst themselves. Throughout, it's not about testing. And in any case, the virus is not about the infected people, it's about dead people. So no one can hide dead people unless the totalitarian and ruthless nation that can do this, and there are fewer that have got that ability in the world. You can't hide dead people easily, even as a government. If you look at the amount, at the deaths, this is the death trajectories in the rest of the world. You can see how America and Europe, how it has affected them. So the majority of these problems is going to be in those countries. And unfortunately, these are the countries which have a footprint throughout the world. Shifts in geopolitics that happen in those areas is going to affect everyone else in the world. And we now look also at the same time at the situation in America. America at the moment is in debt up to the tune of 26 trillion. And these are people who are printing paper money recently, 3 trillion to boost business. And we know that the business that they were boosting is the top one, is not the bottom one. And you can see that the historical debt of America now, the gray one, if you look here, is higher than what it was during the First World War, by far, and is projected to increase. We all know what that means. If America goes broke, America has got a huge military footprint throughout the world. It's already have debt, but it pretends like it does not have debt. It's giving aid to everybody, dropping food parcels from the sky into African soil, but they have a debt. Why are they managing to do this? Because of their superior military power. Now, the industries that have been affected a lot by this, the report that comes from them, obviously, is the airlines, gaming, leisure, tourism, the automobile industry, as well as oil. We know also that oil in America was at some stage dropped to below a cent at some stage. I don't know what was happening at the time. It was something in the Middle East. So these are very important industries that have been affected. They are going to shift a lot of social order. Can move fast on that. So the data that I've been showing you now, information we're showing now, shows that what is going to happen as a result of the pandemic, besides the threat that is perceived against human health, is actually social order. That is where the dent is going to happen. USA is a well-armed bully. And at the same time, it has lost credibility as a world leader people who believe that it was a reliable world leader. Fewer people, even their allies in Europe, are starting to doubt that USA can be trusted. And this pandemic actually reinforced that status. The shambles of the way in which the shambolic way that they are managing it, America, shows people that they really can't rely on the intelligence of the United States anymore. The shift in alliances is already occurring. We can see what happened as soon as the pandemic started and everything. Iran had the confidence to send oil to Venezuela. Both countries are under sanctions by America, but they already showed that they will use that time to maneuver. Cuba also started showing humanitarian activity in Italy and South Africa, and the United States was very unhappy. This is just small examples, which shows that there are different maneuverings that are going to happen, which are going to change. And this is going to be worse when it comes to economics, because in the business world, people are not driven by scruples or morals. They are driven by profits. If opportunities appear, they're going to set aside all moral values and change the alliances. So those things are going to happen as social order is being disrupted by the pandemic. Governments have already started taking advantage to introduce new regulations, taking advantage of the pandemic. It's happening in Europe. It's already causing some troubles in the United States. The electoral process is being modified there, and there is worries. Also, again, that is also exposing the fragility of American democracy, because they even think that it's possible that Trump might refuse to leave power. Now, I wouldn't think America would have fears like that. They obviously do not trust the integrity of the electoral process, which they think they've always presented as if it was, free of the kind of problems that other people have in what they call the third world. But they now have got a problem, showing that they do not trust one another themselves. So the electoral processes are being modified, not just in America, but in other parts of the world. And there's going to be increased exploitation of people, because as people recover from this thing, as the companies recover from this thing, the first thing they're going to do is to exploit people even further. And the exploitation of people is going to cause instability, because people are not going to be happy being exploited. Now, in South Africa, we have a problem, I think, because we have a problem basically of poor leadership. There is a proliferation of counter-revolutionary politicians who have taken the political podium. The opposition to the ruling party is inappropriate. And on top of that, we are cursed with an inept news and media. However, I think during this pandemic, we have benefited from excellent and conscientious and very committed healthcare workers. Most people will tell you how our hospitals, especially in rural areas, have worked under very, very difficult conditions with no facilities whatsoever, but have managed to save lives nevertheless. People have been talking on radio, talking about what these people did for them with nothing in the rural areas. But the other thing that is clear is that survival of people in this pandemic was directly related to the healthcare facilities available in that part of the world. If you look around the country, in fact, around the world, and in America, it was clearly abundantly clear that it's even though there is no treatment, but the quality of healthcare was what really helped to save people. Now, in our country, in rural areas, there's absolutely no care for people. It was not there, and the pandemic just exposed it so clearly. But our problem, I think, is this problem of cynical politicians. I mean, if you look at this picture, this is supposed to solve transport problems in the rural areas where there are no roads at all. We don't just talk about gravel roads. We are talking about no roads in many places. And they say they're going to solve that problem by using what you call. So for me, it's the fact that they're able to do this openly that is problematic, because it shows cynicism of the top notch, really. And these are people who are counter-revolutionary, because what they're doing really is to manage the downfall of the nation. And this is, I find it really, really unbelievable that in South Africa, this thing is allowed. This thing here was really condemned by the public on Twitter. Very, very few political organizations have a memorable contribution to the condemnation of this thing that happened in front of our eyes. The country is allowed to continue normally as a country of two worlds. This is the cynicism that you see here. There are two worlds displayed in this picture, because these vehicles on the other side of this parking lot are those that are designed to operate within the city on tarred roads. And these ones on this side are those that are going to be given to people in rural areas where there are no roads or where there are gravel roads. And it's displayed here with pride. So we live in a country where there is formalized and normalized inequality, and it should be the last straw, but no, it's not. It's not the last straw. People are actually riding that wave, and we are accepting it. It's formalized and normalized inequality, and people have no shame to show it. For me, this really shows that Black people need a liberator, a true liberator, because there is no liberation, and people have abandoned the liberation movement, and we go on as if we are a liberated people. We are not. This, to me, displays so abundantly clear that Black people are still under the yoke of oppression that they were in during apartheid time. And without a liberation movement, parliamentary politics is not going to help this. This is a situation in the country at the moment. This is a numbers, these are raw numbers of people who have died. And it's interesting that Eastern Cape has got this what you call a trajectory of why in the Eastern Cape there are so many people dying. You compare the Eastern Cape with the Gauteng province. Now, Gauteng has got double the number of people in the Western Cape. And it's only started rising. The numbers started, these are raw numbers, by the way. They don't mean anything much. They just mean more people are dying. On the 18th of July, this is when what's called the graph started to go steeply. In other parts of the country, so the regions that are really affected by this pandemic are the what you call Cape Town, Gauteng, Eastern Cape, and KwaZulu-Natal. The other regions are not so affected thus far. For some reason, the start of what you call the infection rates have been rising differently in different parts of the country. I do not know. I think that is probably related to the fact that the testing was done by identifying hotspots. So maybe in those places where the death rates are emerging now, or the number of positive cases are emerging, are those that were done late. So now we're looking at death rate, not at raw numbers now, in the death rate. The death rate globally in the parts that were mostly affected, like Italy, Germany, UK, America, Brazil, all those places, the death rate has been 5 to 6%. The national death rate in South Africa started at when I started collecting the data, it was at 2.1%. And went down to about 1.3% in the end. So the death rate in South Africa has been what is expected of this virus. It was right at the beginning, the death rate was worked up to between 1.7 and 3%. What's interesting is that in the country, Cape Town has got the highest death rate. And I've been asking many people why. What is so? Because this death rate is directly connected with the facility, the healthcare delivery in those areas. Cape Town is supposed to have very, very good what you call healthcare infrastructure, but people in Cape Town are dying double the time that they are dying elsewhere in the country. The gray what you call is Gauteng. Gauteng has been having a death rate of 0.7% for the majority of the time. 0.7. It's only around the after the 21st of July that Gauteng started getting to 1%, which is now about 1.4% or so. So even though they're great numbers, Gauteng has got the highest number of infections and it's got the highest number of positive people, but it's got the smallest, comparatively speaking, number of people who have died from it. It's got twice as less as what you call as Cape Town. What is happening in Cape Town? I do not know. In the Eastern Cape, it's clear what is happening. Eastern Cape is a neglected province. Nobody cares what's happening in the Eastern Cape. Besides the corruption that is adding to that, it has always been a neglected province. And that is being exposed now. It shows very, very clearly. And what is interesting is to look at these trends and compare them with the decisions that have been taken by the government. This is now the provincial district I showed you earlier. This is the national death rate. This shows that I started collecting this data on the 13th of June. By the 11th of June, the trend, the death rate was really going down at the time, which means the number of infected people was increasing, but the number of dying people was low. And then, of course, this was around the 14, 15 there. That was where the second alcohol ban happened. And it shows here that there was an increase in the death rate. But this increase is not an accurate one, because it's showing basically that the infection rate was going down. The number of positive people was lower, because when I look at the raw figures, the number of dying people basically stays the same. But because the number of people, it looks like the death rate is going up, but it's really not changing. The first alcohol ban, when they first allowed alcohol was on the 30th of May. 31st of May, which was before, 2 weeks before this data here that I'm showing. And it shows that the infection rate basically was increasing at the time. So people talk about the alcohol home use. The alcohol, the release of alcohol in level 3, I don't think would have caused an increase in infections. But what it would have caused would be a burden on the hospitals. And I think the government also says that, the burden on the hospitals, because the hospitals' arrangements were very, very weak. And if you look at Eastern Cape, it was 2 weeks after the ban of alcohol that this really sharp rise of dying people occurred on the 21st. And this was the time when Zweli also, or he went to the Eastern Cape on the 22nd, I think. And obviously they had seen something. There was a burden in the hospitals because those hospitals, especially those in PE, were very, very, most of the death I think in Eastern Cape were occurred in PE. You can imagine in PE. That's where most of the problems were. But you must also remember that at the time of the alcohol ban, also 8 million people returned to work during that time. The return of people to work is what would have increased what you call not the alcohol ban, but the return of 8 million people to work would have increased what called infections. But we didn't see much of that really occurring. The infection rate happened because we see that infection rate actually is increasing. This graph here showing the national death rate, really what is showing the spike in the what called that increase in the death rate, that curve there, is really because the number of people who have been infected, positive people, has decreased. And if you look at the overall infection rate, the number of people, of positive people to the number of people that were tested, since I started on the 13th of January, rose, and it seems to me that it's now coming to a plateau. With so-called flattening. So we reached it at least by now. So I think it was reasonable for me. Now I saw NUMSA is querying some of the data. I do not think that the data collected in South Africa are unreliable. I don't think so at all. There is no way you can get a completely accurate record, because I know for a fact that there are people who dealt with COVID without testing and got what's called healthy. They dealt with it, they didn't go for testing, and they treated it and they recovered from it. So there are many people who were never tested, but who got it and then became healthy and did not die. But there are also people who are asymptomatic, who just get something like a mild flu and then they carry on. Others don't even get the mild flu. So there are many people who were infected. So we cannot, it's not possible to record everybody that got infected by the virus. We can only record everybody that recognized infections and then went for testing. But in terms of the infection rate, in South Africa, it's what is expected, 1.7 to about 3%. That is the infection rate that we see here in South Africa. The death rate is 1.7 to 1.3, which is what was expected of this virus because of its nature. It's similar to the other coronaviruses. So I do not think that there's been manipulation of the data. But the manipulation of the data is queried because what was expected by scientists has not happened. I think that is the main problem. So I thought I should end by talking about this because it bothers me a lot. That the political situation in South Africa is really, really troubling, because the dominant force is that from counter-revolutionary politicians. And I'm saying counter-revolutionary politicians because these are people who are working in complete diametrically opposite to what the liberation was about. The role of imperialists in South Africa is astounding. It's astounding, and it's happening in front of our eyes. We are seeing the what called the Bretton Woods organizations, IMF and the World Bank, putting their claws completely. They are embedding them in the political situation. It's happening in front of us, and that's what we expect, because that's what they do. They always exploit situations of crisis like this one. Those organizations, that is their way of, that's how they do things. And we know that those organizations never assist economies, they take over economies. But it's happening here. So we have a problem where imperialists are entrenching themselves and capturing the state. And then, of course, the ruling party has got this internal treachery by unscrupulous and immoral politicians. It's astounding what's happening within the ANC, where people are able to steal money that is supposed to rescue a nation and steal it just like that. So that is immoral to me. It's not only unscrupulous, it's completely immoral. People are dying and there's money for rescue and you steal it. Even food parcels. You steal even food parcels as a ward councillor, whatever. This is immoral. So we've got a serious problem. And then there is a problem of inappropriate opposition, which I'm going to give in the last slide that comes after that. It's a particular treatment, because I worry also about it. Then the news media. This is very important, because the media that we have is basically the media, the sort of media that facilitates self-serving government propaganda. You know, the media has been I don't know whether it's been asked by the government to do that, but throughout this, the news that they're giving is news that is clearly designed to scare people rather than to give them proper information. You know, there was a time when the news was about 2 weeks ago, they screamed that the South Africans recorded the highest number of positive what called COVID deaths. It was around the time when they were digging 1 million graves or something like that. And the media, the radios, were announcing that the highest number, 14,000 people, have now been recorded in South Africa to have what call in 24 hours. But they did not mention that in that particular day, the government had done 10,000 more tests than usual. So it's not, and the news that people also, they're looking at the raw figures. It's not the number of positive people, it's the rate, the number of positive people to the number of tested people that we should be getting, so that we can see. It's clear now when you look at the figures, even though the figures, the number of people are being tested is much, much lower. These days, this past week, it's been much, much lower. But the rate of infections is lower as well. The number of positive people to those people who have been tested has been going to about 27, 26%. It's now about 16%. So it's not the numbers that are reported that is important. It's the rate that we should be looking at. So we have got a media that uses these numbers in order to facilitate what the government is going to do. Because by giving the impression that people are going to die in millions, you are also motivating for a tender of 1 million graves as well. We should have a media that is vigilant, that carries that immediately and tells people. You see what I mean? But they're not doing that. The media is embedded. All these treacherous activities happening in these political organizations are facilitated by these media people who are embedded in the political parties. And they are facilitating propaganda and all kinds of activities by this. So how can, as a nation, we survive and get to freedom if we've got these kinds of arrangements where our people can't even have proper information through a news media? And we can't, because we have no control. The media is not African media, it's Eurocentric media. It does not have the agenda of Africans, it's got other agendas. So these are things that I think we should be looking at. Now, in terms of opposition, there is no opposition to the government, really, as far as I'm concerned, because we cannot call the DA opposition, really. And we cannot call EFF opposition because it's just another version of the ANC. So we have got a problem. When we do not have an opposition, we have a problem, because then we do not ask the correct question. There is intellectual dearth. The correct questions are not asked. And if you don't ask the correct questions, we can never sort out the problems. Take, for example, the situation of Marikana. Marikana was a demonstration of a dangerous partnership between the state and capital. That was the core problem. It was a phenomenon where the state and capital are in intimate partnership. Now in South Africa, that kind of partnership must be a dodgy partnership, because the state and capital in South Africa at the moment should have divergent interests. The state here has got the responsibility of liberating people. The capital has got the responsibility of making a profit. The state does not have control of the capital. So if they agree, then it means there's something wrong. It means there's something wrong because we have not taken over the economy. People who control the economy do not have the same interest as the state. So if there is a partnership there, then there is a problem. But what did the South Africans do? They are focusing, as we always do. We're always focusing on the isolated thing. We focused on Ramaphosa. It does not matter. Ramaphosa does not matter, because he's just an isolated tool within this big arrangement. The key problem is the intimate partnership between the state and capital. And you can remove Ramaphosa, there will be another person, and that relationship will stay. So what we should be doing is to say, how do we solve this problem of the state and capital? Two sectors or forces which have got divergent interests. How can they be in intimate partnership? But what happened there showed that there is that kind of intimate partnership, that in 10 minutes, they were able to kill 34 million South Africans. And South Africans, after that, just looked and we focused on Ramaphosa as usual, which is another something that organization, if there was real liberation movement in opposition, we should have actually stopped the government from this thing of commissions. If you remember, this phenomenon of commissions, which I think is peculiar to South Africans only, is something that apartheid was doing. Each time they wanted to hide information, they would put what called a commission. So the same thing happened with Marikana. The commission takes a long time. People are allowed to vent whatever, and in the end, there's an executive summary and the ceremony to give a report to the president, the same president in this case who was the problem. So we have that problem because we don't ask the correct questions. Same thing is happening with distortion of the land question. Every problem that we have as a people, I'm talking about Black people, if the problem that we have there can be traced, every problem, including the turmoil in our social organization, the turmoil within the family unit, is caused by the absence of land, by the fact that we don't have control of land. But we are allowing the ANC and other people to reduce land to something to be tilled, something to cultivate. No, land is not about life. Land is about identity. It's where we have the ability for self-determination as a people and to do things and organize ourselves the way that suits us according to our cultures. But we do not have that. So everything that we have that is a problem can be traced back to land. So this thing of how the land is being distorted, what the land question is being distorted, is because there is no intellectual voice that's really doing that. And these parties, this opposition that is there, cannot do this. They cannot, because they never understood the land question in the first place. So I'm saying that this is a problem that I wish could be corrected. A proper opposition to this ruling party, because without that, I think we are doomed as a people. The last thing I want to talk about is the fact that we are a defeated people, Black people all over the world. And we are defeated people psychologically. And this, you can see it, and most of it has been achieved by the oppressors through gaslighting. If you notice, if there is a problem, someone is complaining about racism, and you complain that there is racism, you find Black people being the first one to protect the racists by saying that Black people can be racist as well. How can we be racist as a Black people? Anywhere in the world, there's not 1 inch on the planet where Black people are truly, truly free, where they do not have to defend their humanity. How can you then say that we can dish out racism? But Black people are the first ones to do that, to protect what's called a racist. And this is happening because of gaslighting. And the gaslighting has been happening at a grander scale, where we have actually, as Africans, started to exonerate the oppressors, the imperialists, by agreeing with them. They are the ones who tell us about African dictators. They say that Africa is like this because of the dictators. Yes, they may be weak leaders, those. But we must remember that when these people, the West says that they are dictators, they just want money, they just want wealth, as if all they did was to offer them money in order to cause the havoc they are causing in Africa. No, that's not. They first bring the gun and they say, if you don't do it, then if you don't take the money, then you get the gun. And they have done that with others. We know what happened to Kwame Nkrumah and many other African leaders who would not go that direction. So, but what we do also as Africans, we have also fallen into the trap of blaming the ills of Africa on African dictators, thereby exonerating the oppressors. And yet the oppressor, the imperialists, the colonizers have not left Africa, but we are exonerating them by focusing on dictators. I'm not saying that we should not talk about the dictators and condemn them, but we should not, in doing so, exonerate the people, because they are still here. They are still causing problems. They are sitting behind. What we see in South Africa, gaslighting also is happening. We're looking at the Black people who are destroying state enterprises, Eskom and all these things. And white people say that this is black corruption. But if you look closely in all these situations, there are white people at the core of it. But we have ourselves now started to say that the problem is that black people are just poor, and we're exonerating. I mean, white people still sitting on our necks in this country. But we do not see that. We do not see that because they have actually gaslighted for years and years and years. And I think in order to come out of that, we need really, really brave people who will be able to get out of the norms and be able to say it and call a spade, and get us free again, because mentally or psychologically, we are a defeated people. We are not going to win the struggle if we stay like that. Without brave leaders, we're just not going to manage it. Thank you. I'm sorry if I took too long, guys. That was
Wow. What an impressive, inspiring, educational, and informative and empowering presentation. Thanks, Comrade Monde. I just want to say to everybody that if you have any further questions or issues that you want to raise, you are more than welcome to engage with Comrade Monde on Twitter at Monde Ntwasa. That's his Twitter handle, so that if some of your questions have not been answered through this presentation, you may engage with him there. But it was quite eye-opening, and a lot has been shared this afternoon. And I don't think that we will have the time to engage with all of the issues that have been presented today, and a lot has been clarified. So thanks for the inspiring presentation, Tawa. Just in terms of a few questions that I may pose to you, some of the conspiracy issues that tend to come up. The first one is the 5G thing. Is there any relation to 5G, the development of the virus, to the 5G technology? Because I've seen and heard a lot of people ascribing the development of the virus to the economic warfare about 5G between China and the USA. Your comment on that?
What called the things that were circulated at the beginning of this pandemic about 5G we're trying to link the 5G to say that there's no virus, there's 5G. That one I want to completely, reject completely. It's just not true. The virus is there, there's no doubt about it. And we cannot say the disease, the coronavirus, the COVID-19 is caused by 5G. So because that's what some of those things were saying that were circulated. But the economic warfare, between China and the US is real. And, pandemics have always been happening during the time of warfare, or have been going parallel with warfare. The past, if you remember, the one 1918 was during the First World War, and one before that was another European war. So, but this time is no physical war, military war. But it's happening at the height of an economic warfare between the USA and North Korea. That one is real. And 5G is very powerful in terms of penetrating the cyberspace of other countries. And China has already taken that space and is proliferating, it's expanding it around the world. And that one is real. But to connect it to COVID, I don't think so. But COVID definitely is exacerbated. Its impact is exacerbated by the economic warfare between the US, and China. But the direct, what you call in the disease, I don't think so.
All right. Just in terms of, the receptors of the different species of people that we have, is it true that the manner in which we receive the virus as, the dark-skinned or this darker hue is different to, the other Europeans and Asian people?
No, okay. So the genetic differences that were some people were speculating were based on vitamin D.
Mm.
And vitamin D is supporting the innate immune system. And it is known that Black people have got are not stronger than white people in terms of manufacturing vitamin D because of melanin, and therefore this was speculation that they might have a more susceptible. So people were saying that Black people are probably dying more in America because of less vitamin D. I don't really agree with that, because even though we may have less ability as because of our darker skin to make vitamin D, you get vitamin D through food stuff, through other things as well, and you can buy it. So I mean, and those people were saying that were those people really who were trying to remove the social aspect of the death of Black people, the political aspect of it, and saying that no, let's blame what called their genetics instead of blaming. The Black people in America were dying because they're excluded from the economy. There was racism that was also occurring, where in some cases it was on CNN, where someone wanted to be tested and they were not tested because they were Black. You see what I mean? So people would use those things in order to support
their narratives. No, great. The other thing that some of us have been interested in is around the fact that we have not had different perspectives and different narratives to what is in the mainstream. Probably because we have been lacking the voice of what I call the patriotic scientists. Why is it that we don't hear more of the different voice that challenges the narrative that we seem to be hearing more about what is happening with regards to this pandemic? And I think that's the first point that I wanted to make, and the second one relates to this pandemic being more prevalent than hunger and poverty, which I think, are more of a pandemic for African people in terms of, the extent to which they destroy people's lives and they kill. I don't know what your perspective is to that.
Okay, if I understand you well, you're saying why are we paying more attention to this pandemic when it's actually
is this the real killer more than
it's actually killing less people than many other things.
exactly, and yet it is so predominant,
And but it had such a big impact.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, I think that's a fair question to ask. Why is this pandemic? People die. More people die of flu than they've died out of this pandemic.
Exactly.
And you would think that in the country, everybody who's died in the past 7 months has died of COVID. Nobody's talking about all the other people who've been dying.
Exactly. That is my issue, because people have been dying left, right, and what I've heard, I mean, from the beginning of this pandemic, that other diseases are more killers than this coronavirus, and yet we are occupied and preoccupied by it, and we close down the economy just so that we can respond to it. And even when we close down the economy, we didn't see much.
Well, I think what you should, I don't know if you realize what I was saying. when I was telling you about this pandemic is not about you or me. It's not about us, really. But it's presented by the powerful as if it is. Pandemics are natural mechanisms to rearrange the planet. That's what it has happened in all the pandemics. They have changed the planet. There are natural mechanisms by which the planet has been changed. This pandemic manages to do that because it's one of many coronaviruses, right? The flu virus and the coronavirus.
Yeah.
This is one of them. But this one is different. It causes a disease that is not the same as the other coronavirus, which we did not even know whether it was respiratory. And it now turns out it's not completely respiratory. It's actually a circulatory, what we call blood disease. And there is no cure for it. That was the problem. The main problem with the virus is that there was no cure.
There was no cure.
People were dying in a very frightening way. When people were dying, you can't breathe. People were dying in a frightening way. So it really frightened people. And then it caused people to lock down. That was the problem. And it was necessary to lock down because there is no cure. If there was a drug that could treat this virus, there would have been no need for a lockdown.
For a lockdown.
Yeah, so that is the difference between it and the other conditions. So it's not that it's really killing a lot more people, but it's scary in the sense that, first of all, it causes a lot of people to become sick and need treatment in hospital, and yet the hospitals can't treat them. They can only manage them. So basically, you take large numbers of people, you put them in a clinical setting, but you can't treat them. You can only manage. You see what I mean? That is the problem with it. That is the main problem. But it's a perfect mechanism to rearrange the world.
The world, and the economy of the world.
Without killing
people. Just in terms of this coronavirus, I mean, there's been various, strands and strains of the coronavirus. There was something called, is MERS, which existed before this SARS-CoV-2, and there was another strand of the virus, and I think it's been with us for a while. Why do you think it was not foreseen that it would be this devastating to, because my sense is that we saw it coming for a while, because I mean, we have been dealing with the coronavirus for a while, different strains of the coronavirus. And this one from, SARS-CoV-2 seems to be more devastating than the other strands of the viruses that were there. And I'm not too sure whether the comments attributed to, the previous two presidents of the United States had anything to do with this particular pandemic, because they did say, a couple of years back that, the world needs to prepare for a pandemic coming from some kind of a flu disease that is coming. And that was like 15 years ago. And even 10 years ago, we had the same, comment coming out of, the previous president of the United States. I don't know, what is your take on that?
Well, I mean, the thing is, pandemics have happened periodically since before Christ. I mean, the first pandemic that is known was about 460 years before Christ. It was a smallpox. So all nations know that at some stage, a pandemic will come, and sometimes it's global, and therefore people need to prepare for them.
Yeah.
So
I think many people were asking the question largely because of some of these conspiracies that, okay, if the Americans are saying there is this pandemic, they are likely to be the creators of the virus, so that they can attack.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, and it's quite possible that they may well be. I mean, nobody really knows, but it's also not surprising if people plan for a pandemic, because it means that you have to look at your healthcare situation, and this pandemic has shown that very well. that you can have. But the thing is, this time there was so many things that encouraged what people call conspiracy. I don't like the word conspiracy theory because sometimes it is used to stifle criticism of things by quickly calling people conspiracy theorists. but there are many reasons why people would expect, because it is known that both China and America, it's been reported that they are working on biological weapons involving viruses, and that they have got facilities for this. And China is not denying that in Wuhan there is a facility where they are doing this. So, but whether this virus has been created by them, it's not clear. It's not known. I know that there have been people at the beginning, scientists, who said that there is no evidence that this was an engineered virus. Of course, when you look at those articles, they're not supported by any experimental evidence that is what called. They just say that we just did not see any trace of genetic engineering. But it will be quite hard to see, if you look at that paper I was showing you, where you can create a virus de novo. You can create that virus, that was a polio virus that was created de novo in the laboratory. It was not different from the other what called polio viruses, and there's no way you could have been able to say it was created de novo in a laboratory. So I don't know why these people are saying that they are sure that the virus that is not engineered virus, this coronavirus. I do not know. There's really no, but they just say that the scientists say that it's clear that this virus is not genetically engineered.
It's quite interesting. I mean, if you look at the stratification of our country, the spatial inequalities, economic inequalities, that impact on the social well-being of our people, you would have expected more and more of our people to have been affected, by this coronavirus and perhaps dying in greater numbers than what we are seeing now. Could it be that we, Black people are more resistant to this virus? Because I mean, some of the remedies that have been spoken about, social distancing and all of those things are practically impossible in the majority of cases where our people live. You can't expect people in Khayelitsha to socially distance. It's just impractical and impossible. And you can't expect, the majority of the people who are staying in the villages to, wash their hands every day and do all of these things that are prescribed as preventative by the government. Are there any other possible remedies that could have been considered besides, this, first aid prescriptions that are given by the state?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, and so I'm saying, one of the things that this virus did was to expose the inequalities.
You did say.
It's not only that, I mean, even it's not just social distancing, it's other things. So look at the schools.
Exactly.
We are allowing the whites to carry on with education as normal. Black people are not going to school. And it's normal. In South Africa, it's normal.
It is normal, which is a problem for me.
It's normal that whites can continue having their education, but Black people can stay at home. But you're right. There is something that has been happening in the Black community, which is not clear at the moment. You must remember, Black people also have got indigenous knowledge that they use towards labor. And I think really in this case, that's what has worked. It's normal for Africans to see their face when there is a what call. And this would be a perfect way to prevent this, but even when it's actually infected you, to prevent it from spreading, to steam your face and inhale hot steam. Because you kill it in the upper respiratory tract, and if it does not get past that, you'll be fine. So I do not know. I mean, and the thing is also the lockdown. the lockdown in South Africa, all those measurements, like you say, they were for the urban areas. The
Exactly.
lockdown was
never a lockdown in any of the townships, really.
It was never observed in rural areas. It was not observed in townships. So whatever has happened to Black people in South Africa cannot be attributed to the lockdown. No, it can't. The only thing that it can do is that it is not the lockdown that it did was it prevented people from going to work. Work would be a perfect way of distributing the disease. So we can, in fact, expect now that everybody, the economy is completely open, that there may be, a rise in infections. If people do not use masks, but because in the workplace, it's almost impossible really to prevent. And it's going to be worse because you're going to be mixing people who probably, because Black people probably have herd immunity by now, because they never locked down. And herd immunity is very important because it's protective. It protects the community in which you are. So Black people in the townships and the rural areas would now be protecting themselves through herd immunity. So the virus will be weakened in those areas because most people are now probably immune. They've had contact with the virus, and the immune people protect the other ones.
Exactly.
Infection. But people like us who've been sitting here in these bubbles, now once people who come,
you're vulnerable. You're more vulnerable.
So there may be a shift of infections now. The people in the urban areas are probably going to be in trouble now because we are going to mix. But at the same time, it might help because the people who already have herd immunity will also protect those who have not been in lockdown, who don't have that immunity. Because immunity doesn't block.
And I'm sure a lot of us are reminded of Dr. Chabalala Msimang with her beetroot and garlic remedies, because just about everyone is now talking garlic, beetroot, and all of those.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people just use their indigenous knowledge and Otherwise, we have only God knows what really is protecting Africa. Everybody has tried everything to try and explain. They just can't explain. I mean, when I saw people getting infected in Cali and what called before the lockdown and Alexander, and I thought, oh my God, we're finished. But what happened?
Yeah. Well, great. And I just want to thank you for really eye-opening and very inspiring presentation. And I really enjoyed it, and I'm hoping that all of those who managed to log in really appreciated and loved the presentation that you gave us this afternoon. And I'm sure people are going to continue to interact with it, so you should expect some DMs on your Twitter handle coming asking a couple of questions or two.
But why can't people speak here on this platform?
No, they can. I did allow them to speak, those who wanted to share their views, and people prefer to type their messages. Are you available on Facebook, those who want to engage further?
I'm not very strong on social platforms. I'm available on Facebook, but I'm more active on Twitter.
Okay, more active on Twitter. Okay, so your Twitter handle is at Monde Ntwasa. Those who want to interact with Professor Monde Ntwasa, they are more than welcome to. It's been a very good 2 hours, and I think it's been well spent. And I want to thank you on behalf of AZAPO, for giving us the time to really engage with us and share your perspective on matters related to this coronavirus. And we would like to really thank you very much for...
Oh, there are questions on this thing, eh?
Yeah, there are questions, but if you look at
the ACE2 receptors exhibit different behavior between those.
Yeah, but if you look at most of these questions that people were asking, you actually answered them through your presentation. Because as you were proceeding and I was noting all of these questions, I see, here's a question and here's the answer. So that's how good your presentation was. The only thing that you may want to explain to some of the people is, the issue around asymptomatic and the meaning to it. Because I don't think you spoke about, those kind of.
Yes, well, that's very interesting actually, because there was a paper that was put on Twitter yesterday by one of the top journals, showing that there is a large number of asymptomatic people. Some of them are mild and some of them have no symptoms whatsoever. But what was encouraging is that those people who are asymptomatic produce very strong immunity. And it's been shown, this one has been shown experimentally. They show in the journal that they've got very strong T cell, which is cell-mediated immunity, as well as antibody immunity. So, and basically the paper is saying, the person who was tweeting it, which was a colleague of mine at Cambridge, is against this lockdown.
Yeah.
He was showing that paper as proof that the lockdown was not necessary, because people will probably have got herd immunity. And herd immunity is, theoretically, scientists say that it will be more effective when 2/3 of the population, of whatever population, have got the immunity. Then you get a fully fledged herd immunity. And people thought that it might take too long. Of course, with the numbers that we've got, we are far from 2/3. But you see, there are many people who have had contact with the and I can tell, in the rural areas, probably virtually everybody, and in the townships, most people have had some brush with the COVID, but a lot of them did not have any symptoms. So probably the virus is already weakening in terms of transmission because of the herd immunity. Yeah, asymptomatic people, it's experimentally shown that they do develop cell-mediated immunity in the form of T cells as well as antibody immunity.
And how do the flu stats compare to this coronavirus stats in terms of the death rate? Do you have an idea?
It's comparable. It's comparable. The death rate to flu is, because the death rate at the moment is about 3%.
Yeah, you did say.
Yeah, so it's about it's the same as flu, or even less actually.
Or it's the same as or even less, and yet we talk more about it. That's an interesting aspect.
The only thing with this coronavirus is that it's more transmissible compared to that is another problem with it. That it's much quicker to transmit. So one person can transmit it to 3 people in a very short time.
In a very short space of time.
Yeah, and the other thing I think that is important, which is this thing about this virus being airborne, because
is it really airborne?
I think people misinterpret the term airborne, because I've seen people walking on the street alone in open spaces and putting masks on, and I'm thinking they probably think that it's possible to get it.
Exactly. This somebody was
so
like,
airborne does not mean that. What airborne means is that in an environment like in a clinical setting, in the lab, in the hospitals, where people are using machines to control patients, the ability of the virus to linger in the air is
there
much stronger. Also, if you get into a situation like in a lift, even if you are alone, you don't know how many people were there before you. They have just left. So if there's people have been with aerosol coming from their nostrils, from breathing, from talking, they've gone, but the virus might still be lingering in the air, and then you come in. So it's airborne like that. But it's not like viruses cannot withstand desiccation, in other words, drying. That unlike bacteria, they can't exist in a dry environment. So if you released it through spitting, when you are talking, it's going to stay in that droplet. But once that droplet dries up,
then the virus dies.
Yeah, the virus will die. And it's unlike bacteria, because bacteria are different. They don't have that fat thing covering them. They've got a cell wall. They're more like plants, bacteria. So they'll stay in a dry environment, and they can even form spores. And the spores can be carried out in the air, from the ground and whipped up by the air. So they can be airborne that way. But this virus is not airborne in that way. It's just that if you're in an enclosed environment, then you must know that it will linger in that situation for longer because of the environment. Where the wind is blowing nicely, it's not possible. And to wear a mask when you're walking on the road.
And just just inform me, for how long does it linger? I mean, there's this thing that if, for instance, you are at your workstation and you're working there, and somebody else cannot come and sit on the same table and work with you, because otherwise there's this possibility that you may be infected by a virus, through touching and we travel through taxis, through buses and so forth, and we touch, we speak. And you're saying, well, this virus does linger. For how long does it linger? And
okay, so on surfaces, it depends. So if you're sitting at a workstation where you're working on a computer, like I'm talking now, I mean, if I've got the virus now, it's probably on my cell phone, which is sitting here next to me. It's on on this thing. It's on the mouse. So because I'm spraying as I'm speaking, I'm spraying droplets from my mouth. So, and they've done tests to show that on wood it stays for that long, on paper for that, on cardboard for that long. So but it doesn't stay for too long. Like I say, once the surface dries, it's almost impossible for the virus to survive in a dry, what you call space, because it's fat, basically. But, the thing about taxis, what I found strange when they allowed 100% use in taxis was people saying that then open the windows. It just did not make sense to me at all. Because when you are in a taxi and the taxi is moving, air comes from outside and goes. So if you are in front of the taxi and the windows are open and you cough, what you're in fact doing is to spray the virus throughout the taxi. You could say someone, maybe the rear windows, the last windows, maybe those could be open because they basically would suck the air out, from the back. But to open all the windows in the taxi is silly. And I mean, and this announcement, it seemed to be an advice from a white lady. And I'm thinking, has she ever even been in a taxi? Maybe she's thinking about her family cars. Because there's a problem in South Africa that advice comes from people who don't have the experience.
and the knowledge. You see, that's a problem.
But they are trusted naturally because it's them.
Yeah. I mean, the other example is relating to, if sport. There was a time when, when we were locked down and we really felt it, and, we wanted to just be in the outside environment. And when the gates were open, that people can jog and do all those kind of things. And there was, floodgates opened, and we saw a lot of people on the road, running and, just enjoying the atmosphere. And I don't know, I read in some scientific journal that more especially if you are running as a group of people, so you need to give each other some kind of a distance of about 2 meters between yourself and the guy in front of you, because otherwise all of those droplets are dropping back to you, and you don't know the guy in front of you whether he doesn't or he's not a carrier of this virus, and you may just be grabbing it from all of those people who are running in front of you. Is that factual?
Yeah, no, you're joking. Yeah, definitely. If you're jogging without a mask and you're behind someone, if the person in front of you has got a COVID, you are putting yourself at risk. So even outside, you have to wear a mask when you are with other people, because the wind is going in all directions when you are walking. side by side with someone. And it will be carried by the wind in that case. So it's airborne in that sense, that it will move from the person next to you. But again, if you have got a big enough distance between you and that person, even though you're walking together, you can, because it's not going to move too far. I mean, you must remember it's happening, it's carried in those microscopic droplets coming from the other person's mouth or nose if they do not have the mask. But if you've got a mask together and you're working together, it's okay, I think.
No, there's somebody asking the question whether is what we're seeing now, is it realistic or is it underreporting in terms of the numbers? I know you did say earlier that we should trust the numbers that we see as reflective of what is happening. But judging by the inadequacies of our country, are we underreporting or?
No, I don't think that we are underreporting because you see, we have done. I think we've actually done more tests in South Africa, comparatively speaking, than some of the so-called first world countries. Actually, I think Britain. I think the Western world has started to manipulate the data because it's starting to embarrass them. I mean, if you look at CNN and you look at the number of dying people, they are increasing now. The United States is about 50 countries. They talk as if it's becoming an increasing problem. But you look at the number of deaths that are affected per day, it's about 1,000 or 2,000. These are 50 countries. So it's not moving as fast as it's used to. So I think they're starting to manipulate the results there. In the UK, they've definitely manipulated them. You can't really manipulate successfully the data of COVID because of the deaths of people and because of the hospitalizations. See what I mean? Because that is what you can't hide. If you look, I mean, people are telling me, I think it was Wade who told me that Nasrec was empty. I mean, and it's happening in other parts of the country as well, where all the arrangements that were made for hospitalization of people have turned out not to be unnecessary, have never been used. You see what I mean? So I don't think there's been manipulation because you can't hide those things. But the results cannot be completely accurate, and that is all over the world. That is all over the world because there are asymptomatic people, there are people who treat themselves at home. There are people who just recover without even treating themselves.
Exactly.
So you cannot have an exact data, but you can have trends. It's the trends that you should be looking at more than the raw data that comes out. The people keep on. For instance, in the Eastern Cape, there was a time they reported 400 people. Now I take all this data every day that the MPs were and put them on a spreadsheet and analyze them. So they reported 400 people died in the Eastern Cape on that day. It was the religious number. Everybody was screaming, blah, blah. But the thing is, when you look at that, in the previous week, there have been like 4 people, 10 people, and all of a sudden, and they give the impression that when the radio reports, they give the impression that 4 people died in the previous 24 hours. They don't say the people reported in the previous 24 hours. They say in the last 24 hours, 400 people died. You see what I mean? But the number that was reported in that 24 hours. The Cape Town has been the place where the reporting has been almost the same. The numbers in Cape Town have been like consistent, same range up on average. Whereas in Gauteng, the numbers increase every 5 days. In the Eastern Cape, every 7 days, you suddenly have a big jump, which means the reporting is taking, or the reporting of deaths is not happening as it happens. The collection of data that's given that reported. But they report in the news in a way that scares people, that all of a sudden we had 400 people dying. You see what I mean? So I don't think the results have been manipulated because you can't really manipulate. You can't see you can't hide dead people. You can't. And you never saw in South Africa people being abandoned, bodies being abandoned, like it happened in South America. where both is.
It's such that we no longer hear of deaths due to HIV and AIDS. All the deaths are now about COVID.
It's about COVID, yeah.
And we don't hear anything else. And one would wonder whether we're going to see the numbers that are reported for the Spanish flu, because I mean, if you go back to that history, they say about 500 million people died across the world as a result.
People died in the Spanish flu, and now it's 3.6%. There are 500 million people got infected, and 50 million of them died.
Okay. So we're not gonna go to those numbers.
Well, we don't know. It's still early stages for us. We're not even a year into it, so we don't know what's going to happen when the economy starts. Because the economies are where the damage happens once they open, because the workplace is another place that is.
So what kind of normal should Black people, as we close off, should Black people expect after this pandemic? I know for others, they will say, well, we'll have a new normal. But I mean, for Black people, will there be a different normal?
But that's what I was talking about, that what we should expect as Black people is that the capitalists who are worried now about our situation of dying are going to cause more havoc than the pandemic, because these people, as they want to maximize profits, I tell you, the first sufferer of this thing is going to be labor.
Yeah.
So we can expect all sorts of things that are going to be done on labor to maximize profits as people recover from this. All sorts of things are going to be done, from reduced salaries to more working hours to a lot of pushing, fewer people doing jobs of many. So all those things, that is the new normal that's going to happen, and it's going to be, you've got to be happy that you've got a job. So many people don't have a job. So we've got to accept all those things. That is, it's not a new normal really for us. But
it's always been like that, but it's just a different revolution. Yeah. No, thanks. I think we should end it there for today. And thanks for your, thought-provoking contribution to this discussion. I look forward to next weekend's discussion, because I will be hosting Professor Kwandi Kondlo. And we'll be discussing the new dawn, the impact on governance, politics, and the economy. So I really look forward to that conversation. So yeah.
I hope we can join that.
No, most definitely, you must join. He is also very excited about it. I'm also very excited about it. So I really encourage everybody else to come and join us next week for a discussion on the new dawn, the impact on governance, politics, and economy. And that's a program for the next weekend.
That question that's lingering there about the ACE2 receptors being different genetically, I haven't seen what to call evidence of that.
Okay.
These are the receptors that facilitate the infections. The person is saying that there is evidence. I suppose there are reports showing that they are different in the different populations: African, Caucasian, and Asiatic.
Okay.
And I don't think that can really be what called in this case, because it can't explain what's happening in Africa. Because you must remember, in America, it's affecting African Americans, and African Americans have got they're almost identical genetic print as us in Africa.
Yeah.
People have that. They still have the genetic what you call with us. So what is happening to us would be replicated in them.
No, thank you. And thanks very much. Okay, let's see each other next week then for the New Dawn discussion, the impact on governance, politics, and economy. Midweek, we have a memorial service or a commemoration service for Comrade Fezile Chume. You do know Fezile Chume. Comrade Fezile Chume, one of the stalwarts of the BC movement. I think we'll be having that event on Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. So we look forward to engaging you, on Tuesday. And then for this discussion next Saturday, we will be handling the New Dawn. Thank you very much. And thanks to Professor Ntwasa for a great afternoon. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thanks,
Cheers.